welcome to the first vlog of 2023. It is officially 8:50 AM on Sunday the 1st of January 2023, and we are starting the new year with a hike. So we've just arrived at somewhere in the North York Moors National Park called Goathland. I've never been here before, but Jay has planned a route, which is always the best way for me because I am so terrible at coming up with ideas for places to go on days out, whereas Jay is really good at route planning, so I just let him do the work and I just turn up and enjoy the day. So we're going out for a hike. It is windy, but otherwise a really beautiful day. We were up nice and early, had breakfast and got out, and the reason we were able to do that is because last night we spent our New Year's Eve at home on the sofa with the cat watching Seinfeld, and we were in bed by 9 PM, which meant that we could start the new year fresh, no hangover, no tiredness, and I just personally like to start the new year that way. Obviously each to their own, and some people love going out, but for me nothing is better than a nice cozy evening in and then being able to start the year fresh and ready to like take on a beautiful hike. And we have just gotten so lucky with the weather today, so that's the plan for today and I'm very excited. I also decided to start the year with a new book, so I brought my new book with me along for the journey. I decided to pick up Wild Pets by Amber Medland, which was a gift to me from my friend Lucy back in December before Christmas, and I managed to read about 36 pages. So far I'm interested. It's a very, I don't want to say exactly stream of consciousness, but it's very like short, snappy kind of insight into someone's inner monologue rather than like a really plot driven book so far, and it doesn't seem to be giving us a lot of information about the characters and their history, and it's definitely just kind of like drip feeding info about the characters, but I'm quite enjoying it so far. So the main character is a woman called Iris, and we basically are introduced to her as having like moved from, I think, the UK to America, and she is kind of like settling in but feeling a little bit untethered, and we don't really know much about what has brought her over to America, but we kind of know that she just feels a little bit, I guess, yeah, untethered and doesn't really know what she's doing with her life. But we get this connection that she has to two people that she met at university called Ezra and Nance, and the book is kind of moving between the three perspectives of those characters and sort of introducing us to their current connection as well as their shared history with one another. So I'm really enjoying it, and I've obviously only read about 36 pages so far, so I don't know too much about what it's going to be like, but from the bit that I've read so far, it's definitely giving me vibes of things like conversations with friends in the mindsets of the characters. They're quite academic, the way that the characters are being presented so far, and they're sharing a lot of philosophical ideas with each other, and it seems to be friendships that are based around debate and challenging one another, so it feels similar in that sense to conversations with friends, and also I guess this medley of characters that feel, I guess, quite disconnected from each other but somehow manage to continually orbit around each other. That kind of has the same vibe as well as that book, which is obviously one of my favourite books, so I'm hoping that this will continue to feel like that, and I'm really looking forward to reading more. So that's what I've done so far today. Up early, read some book, driven to a new hiking location, and we're just about to head out for our walk, so I'll catch up with you when we are out there on the trail. Right, hats off. Oh god, that feels good. Right, we just got back to the car and it was a 11-mile hike in the end. We almost stopped about, how far would we have been in? Like maybe 8-9 miles? 9-ish miles. But then Jay wanted to go to an extra waterfall, which in the end was really cool, so it was worth doing. But at the time we'd come back via the car park and it was just so tempting to just get in the car and go home, but thanks to Jay we ended up going back out and it was definitely worth it. So that was just over 11 miles and a total of 27,000 steps. So in my opinion that's definitely a day well spent, and I feel like especially on New Year's Day it's worth going out and doing something like that to ring in the new year. So we're back in the car about to head home. I'm going to do a little bit more reading on the drive home, and then when we get back I'm all well overdue a hot drink of some kind, and I'm going to decide whether I fancy a tea, a coffee or a hot chocolate, and I'll just see what I feel like when I get home. Woo! Woo! I am so rarely without a hot drink. Like there is no occasion where someone offers me a hot drink and I won't say yes. So maybe I just put more thought into this than the average person. Let me know if I'm alone in this, but basically I will have a tea, a coffee, a hot chocolate if it's ever offered to me. But when it comes to choosing it for myself, I feel like each of those 3 hot drinks have like a very specific role in my life, and I definitely love them all equally, but what I fancy and what I need definitely depends on like the time of day and the circumstances and what I've been doing. So obviously I've really needed a hot drink when we got back from our walk today, specifically because obviously we've been outside all day, it's winter time, and I needed something to warm me up. But when it came to choosing which one to go for, I ended up settling on hot chocolate because I feel like there is just something almost magical about how hot chocolate can bring you back to life. It is just the perfect combination of like sugar and heat, where it warms you up and yet it just like boosts some energy back into you, whilst also simultaneously being really comforting, because it obviously isn't a caffeinated drink like coffee is, and yet still somehow I guess the sugar has that same kind of like boosting you back with energy kind of effect, and I absolutely love it. So I feel like at the beginning of the day I always want a coffee. Tea is like my usual go-to beverage for most of the day, and then hot chocolate is just what you need when you need a bit more pep in your step and you just need to like come back to life. So that hot chocolate was delicious and it was the perfect way to round off a really great start to the new year. I feel like we got so incredibly lucky with where we went for our walk today. It was basically like a circular loop from a place called Goethland, I think I mentioned that when we arrived earlier, to another town called Grossmont. So it kind of like we walked along the moors towards Grossmont, and then there is an old unused railway track that has been turned into like just a public bridle way that we could use to walk back. And we also stopped by a couple of waterfalls, and we got so lucky with the weather. It was a beautiful day, and we looked at lots of locations. Like we were considering maybe going to Wales this morning to do a hike up Snowdon, but it looked terrible in terms of weather. We were going to look at going to the Lake District, but again, terrible weather. And yet luckily right on our doorstep in the North York Moors it was perfect. So Jay did an absolutely stellar job of choosing that route, and it was also very nice because obviously it's New Year's Day. Most people I guess go out on New Year's Eve and stay up late, so they don't want to be up really early, but we went to bed by 9 p.m. so we ended up having the whole trail to ourselves for pretty much like the first half of our walk until maybe about midday, and the second half we started to see a lot more like families and other people out on the trail. But that first half was so peaceful, and honestly I could not have picked a better way to start the new year. But since we got home I have obviously indulged in that hot chocolate and have been doing a bit more reading of Wild Pets. I'm now on page 162. I have no idea why this book is called Wild Pets. Just saying it out loud right then made me really think, why is it called that? Because nothing in the context of the book or the plot or the characters has necessarily touched on that topic, but I'm really enjoying it. I am on page 163 at the moment, and it is a really interesting book. I've noticed more similarities to Sally Rooney's writing style in the sense that it just feels very, like I said earlier, I don't want to use stream of consciousness because I don't think that's the exact right word to use, but it really puts you into the mind of the narrator because there are no speech marks or quotation marks used when dialogue is happening, so you just kind of like remain in the flow of the text rather than feeling like a sort of an observer removed from the plot. It feels like you are far more like in the action, if that makes sense, because there isn't that sense of removal of like reading dialogue. It feels more as though you're experiencing it, and that's something that Sally Rooney uses as well. And I just think the very fragmented style of jumping between protagonists and experiences and just providing insights here and there that gradually build a picture of these characters, and crucially the way that the characters interact with and inform like one another's relationships, just feels very Sally Rooney-esque. And I noticed that it is a Faber publication, which is the publishing house that published Sally Rooney's books as well, so I guess there's maybe a connection there in the sense that they also felt drawn to this writing style because they've published similar things before. But obviously as a fan of Sally Rooney's work, that's only a good thing for me, but I wanted to mention that because I know that for some people that lack of use of speech marks and things like that is a really jarring thing, and I've seen a lot of people don't like it, so I thought it was worth mentioning. But it is an interesting book to talk about because it's something that has kind of made me think a little bit more about reading for yourself rather than reading for what you think people want to hear you talk about. And maybe that's something that's unique to me as someone who makes videos about books, but I think it can be very easy to feel pressure to read books because you think that they're going to be exciting to talk about, which is obviously a nice thing to do. But it doesn't necessarily equate to exciting book to talk about, meaning book that you're going to really like. And this is the sort of book that I personally really enjoy because you just get this insight into characters and their lives and the way that their relationships develop. But there is no, you know, major plot point, there's no huge amount of action. It is just kind of like the drifting apart of people who were friends at university and romantic partners at university, and how life can take people in different directions, and how that can mean that people that you still feel really fondly about don't necessarily sort of move into future parts of your life in the way that you'd hoped or expected that they would. And so it's very meandering, it just feels very personal, and yet I love it. But there's not a lot to say because there's no major plot points, and so I'm really enjoying it. But when it comes to describing why, it's more of a feeling than anything else. It's just an interesting book to read, and I really personally enjoy those books where you just get to dive deep into characters and the way that they interact with each other, and so I'm really enjoying that. But that kind of led me onto the next thing I want to mention, which is that I just opened up Goodreads today, obviously new year, and I thought I would see my 2022 year in books. And it was interesting because I of course did not reach my Goodreads goal last year. I had set the goal at 75 books and I read 44 books, and of course it would have been great to reach that goal, but equally I don't really care because I think reading is something that you should be able to fit in and enjoy around your life, and not something that you should kind of like drill sergeant yourself into hitting goals just because you need to reach those numbers. And so could I have read more? Yes, I could have, but did I? Clearly not, so it's not sort of worth dwelling on that point. But I was kind of looking back at the books that I had read last year and trying to think about what I want to read this year, sort of going forward, because while it is a new year, I think it's nice to sort of make some reading plans and not necessarily set strict TBRs, but start to think about what books I want to prioritise. And I do want to make an effort this year to continue to read the books I already own rather than buying loads of new books all the time. I don't mind buying new books if there's something I really want to read, but there's lots of things on my shelves already that I could be reading. So I've pulled a few off my shelves, and some of them I'm sure will be really exciting to talk about, but others may fit more into this category of books that I really enjoy reading but aren't necessarily that exciting to talk about because they're not really action-filled, plot-driven books. And I'm just sort of giving myself permission this year to read what I want to read and when I want to read it and chat about what I think of it. But if there's not loads to say, then that's okay as well, as long as I'm having a good time reading. So some of the books, aside from this one, which is obviously my first read of the year, that I'm going to be prioritising are, in no particular order, a couple of non-fictions, because I actually read 2 non-fictions towards the end of last year. One was I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jeanette McCurdy, which I'm sure a lot of people have read because it was very popular at the end of last year, and rightly so because it was such an interesting memoir. And the other one was called Out and Back by Hilary Allen, and it was a book from an ultra runner who had a really dramatic accident on an ultra race, which obviously changed the course of her career. And it was a very interesting and like quite heart-wrenching but also very motivating story. So on that line, I've got 2 books which are both running related actually. One is called The Rise of the Ultra Runners, A Journey to the Edge of Human Endurance. That's obviously about ultra marathons. And the other one is Born to Run, which is about also ultra runners actually. So both about ultra running, but both about running in general, because as I have mentioned now, I'm going to be running my first ever marathon in 2023. So I feel like motivation in the form of books will be very, very welcome. So those are the non-fictions I've picked up. I also want to get back to a series that I started last year. Or actually I started it the year before, but I got into it last year a little bit more, and that was the Bridgerton series. I've made it through how many books now? I think 4 of the books. So this one, When He Was Wicked, which is Francesca's story, is the next one that I would need to read. And I don't know exactly when the next series of Bridgerton will be coming out, but it's usually around springtime, like March, April. So I'd like to kind of get back into the flow of the stories before that series comes out. I also have picked up a arc which my friend Em sent me, and that is A Yellow Face by R.F. Kuang, and this one sounds really interesting. I don't know if the blurb is in here anywhere. Okay, I don't think it actually has a blurb because it's an arc, but it says, what would you steal for success? Her ideas, her story, her name, her skin. And I think the premise of Yellow Face is essentially that there are 2 sort of friends, colleagues, fellow students who have done the same course together, and basically one of them has reached like a really high level of success and the other one is kind of struggling along, and a circumstance kind of presents itself where one of them, the one who isn't as successful, is able to steal a manuscript from the one who is, and it's all about kind of like the aftermath of what happens when she does that. So that sounds really interesting, and I have never read an R.F. Kuang book, but obviously I know that Babel was out last year and that was very popular, and previously there was The Poppy War, which again is on my shelf but I haven't gotten around to it. So I feel like this one sounds really interesting, quite thrillery, but in a way that is a lot more about like why humans do what they do, which I always think is an interesting thing to uncover. So this one is probably quite a high priority because it sounds really intriguing. I also would love to read some more classics this year. I don't think I prioritised it enough last year, probably because I set myself a challenge of reading loads of classics and I got overwhelmed and ended up just not reading anything at all. So I thought I would start with something that I have had recommended to me previously, and that is Far From the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. Now, if you were watching me in Vlogmas, you will know that I started reading Tess of the D'Urbervilles in December, and because it is such a tragic novel, I found it really hard to get through, and it just didn't feel fitting with the season of December and of the cheer and joy that I was trying to find in books. So I kind of abandoned that halfway through. Not to say that I won't read it again and go all the way through, but it just didn't feel right at that moment in time. But Far From the Madding Crowd has been recommended as one of Thomas Hardy's lighter books, and a lot of people seemed worried that I was going to give up on Thomas Hardy altogether, so I think this one is going to be a good one to try out his writing style and hopefully get a bit more enjoyment and joy out of his books, and also to tick another classic off of my list. And then finally, I have picked up one which is, I guess, a biography or a memoir. I'm not really sure actually. I actually got this for Jay for Christmas, but it sounds really interesting for me, and it is Walden by Henry David Thoreau, and it says that in 1845 Thoreau, a Harvard-educated 28-year-old, went to live by himself in the woods in Massachusetts. He stayed for over 2 years, living self-sufficiently in a small cabin built with his own hands. Walden is his personal account of the experience, in which he documents the beauty and fulfillment to be found in the wilderness, and his philosophical and political motivations for rejecting the materialism which continues to define our modern world. And I feel like that sounds probably quite like moving and also motivational, in the sense of starting a new year and connecting with the less materialistic things that we can focus on, and just like finding joy in the world around us rather than in the things that we have. So I feel like that should be quite an interesting book to read. I'm not really sure where that sort of falls in terms of classics or non-fictions, probably a bit of both, but it sounds interesting, and also I think the cover is exceptionally beautiful. So there we have it. I've rambled on for quite some time about my reading plans for 2023. Of course, this is just the start of the year, so who knows what direction we'll go in, what new books will find their way onto my shelves, and what I will end up reading this year. I should also mention, actually, you can see right there is my box set of Anne of Green Gables, which my friend Mary was so kind to gift me for Christmas. I have read the first 2 books in the series, but the rest of them are waiting for me patiently over there, and I cannot wait to read the series in its entirety. So that's another thing that is high priority for me this year. But I would love to know in the comments down below if you have any major reading plans of this year, books that you definitely want to tick off your list, if you've started your first read of the year yet and what that's going to be, and just what you're feeling about reading this year. Are you setting a goal or just going with the flow? I would absolutely love to know. I will probably set a goal for myself as usual. I'll probably put it at 75, but I will just see how the year goes and take it from there. So there we go. It is now time to make dinner, and I have no idea what to make. I'm hoping Jay has a really strong desire to have one thing in particular so that I don't have to decide, because I don't mind cooking, but I hate choosing what to eat. Today, and I cannot wait to have a shower later and sort that out. But it is now Tuesday morning, and today is my last day off work before going back and starting a brand new year tomorrow. So with that in mind, I'm planning to have a very chilled out day, pretty much just spending the whole day at home and making the most of just one final day of rest before getting right back into the work schedule tomorrow. I started the day in what I would describe as the best way, by which I mean I had a cup of coffee from my new coffee machine that I got for Christmas, and I sat down to watch the first episode of the new season of Call the Midwife, which is basically one of the best things that you could ever do. I feel like a hot drink and Call the Midwife is just a match made in heaven, and Call the Midwife is, and has been for many years, one of my favourite shows because it is just so wholesome and wonderful, and I absolutely love it. So when the new season is out every January, I get so excited. And it was on TV last night, but because we had such a busy day with hiking, I was exhausted and decided, rather than making the mistake that I made when I watched the Christmas special, which was to start watching it on the night when it was on live and falling asleep halfway through, I would save it until the morning after and just enjoy the show completely. And that is what I did this morning, and it was the right decision because it was so nice to just get up. Jay went to the gym, so I had the house to myself, made that lovely cup of coffee and sat down to watch the episode, and it was so wonderful. So that was how I started my morning. I've since just done a little bit of stretching, got undressed, and I'm about to head out for my first run of 2023. I've got 5 miles on the roster, and at the moment I'm not actually training for anything specific. My marathon training starts towards the end of January, so for the next few weeks I'm kind of just base building and starting to get up to the mileage that I'll be doing at the start of marathon training, so that when I actually officially start I can kind of hit the ground running, no pun intended. So I'm just taking things kind of easy, but starting to do the amount of runs that I will be doing when marathon training starts, which is like 4 runs a week. So today I'm doing 5 miles, which I'm just planning to take nice and easy. I've had a bit of pain in my left shin recently, so I'm just planning to get out and do the miles, but take them fairly easy and not put any pressure on like time and pace. And it's just going to be nice because it's such a beautiful sunny day to just enjoy a first run of the year and get that first run logged on Strava. So that is my plan, and then the rest of the day is probably going to be spent on the sofa reading some more of Wild Pets. But as it is my last day off before starting a new year of work, I thought I would finish up this vlog here. This is just a happy new year, welcome to 2023. Hope you have had a wonderful new year however you have spent it, and as I mentioned yesterday, I would love to know if you have any New Year's resolutions, what your plans are for reading, and what your first book of 2023 is going to be. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.